Thanks for all joining back so promptly. Hope you had a good lunch. Looks as though we're almost up to a full contingent, and I think probably time for us to make a start. And I'm sure you're all eager to hear which stream you've ended up in. So welcome to the Homes and Communities stream. So for the rest of this weekend, we're going to be focusing, doing a deep dive into the topic of homes in particular. And then weekend 4, we're going to be looking at the topic of communities. So we've just got a couple of people still joining us. So I'm just going to pause a second whilst they join. Okay, I think that's everybody now in. So so for this weekend, we'll focus on the topic of homes. Then next weekend, or the next weekend of the Assembly, we'll be focusing on the other topic of communities. So all members of the Assembly have been randomly assigned to the different streams. This is to help to ensure that we get a really good, diverse and representative group in each of the streams. So apologies if this is not the topic that you would have chosen yourself, but I can promise you that it's incredibly important. It's going to be really interesting as you'll get to see throughout the rest of the weekend. So we have an evidence lead for this topic, Daisy, who is from the evidence group. So Daisy, could you quickly introduce yourself?
Well, hi everyone, delighted to be here and look forward to spending the afternoon with you.
Great, thanks Daisy. So Daisy's going to be playing a similar role to the role Ian has been playing up to this point. So Daisy will be with us for this weekend and for the following weekend to help to guide us through the weekends. Then I think we have Ruth, one of our conveners, with us as well. Ruth, do you want to say a quick hello?
Ruth isn't on the call at the moment, Tim.
Okay, so Ruth hasn't joined us yet, but Ruth will be joining us any minute now, and she'll be joining some of the group discussions as well. So if she arrives in your group, then you'll have an opportunity to say hi to Ruth as well. So next up, we're going to hear from Daisy, who's going to give us an introduction to the topic and what we're going to be covering this week and in weekend 4. So over to you, Daisy.
Thank you, Tim. And again, as I said, I'm so delighted to be here. I still find it strange meeting everyone on little squares on Zoom. So I hope at some point this year we can all meet in person at some point. So as Tim said, I'm Daisy Narayanan. I'm a member of the evidence group for the Climate Assembly. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm an architect and urban designer. And over the last decade or so, I've been working in the field of sustainable transport. As Director of Urbanism in Sustrans, which is a sustainable transport charity, my work involves partnership with communities, with government, local and national organizations to collaboratively create healthier and happier places. Over the past few years, I've been involved in work around the climate action and climate justice. I'm a commissioner with Edinburgh Climate Commission, and I sit on the Climate Emergency Response Group, which is a group of civic leaders that have come together to provide solutions and suggestions to Scottish Government. Tim, would you mind sharing the presentation, please?
Sure, just bear with me 1 second.
And as I said, I'm so delighted to be here and to welcome you. As you know, this group is going to be looking at homes and communities over the next few weekends. We'll be focusing on Scotland's homes and communities, which also includes our public spaces, services like healthcare, education, leisure facilities. I'll just wait till we've got this up and running. There we go. And hopefully I'll be able to change the slides.
I think you may need to tell me, Daisy, when you want to move on.
Oh, that's fine, no problem at all. Do you mind changing to the next slide, please, Tim? So, as Professor Webb told you last weekend, 15% of Scottish greenhouse gas emissions come from our homes. And of that, 80% is for heating and hot water. And as she explained, the energy performance of much of our current housing is also pretty poor, meaning a lot of energy is wasted. We need to think about how we support people to waste less energy, primarily through better insulation. As Professor Webb also said, we need to think about how we heat our homes. She explained why moving from gas to electricity couldn't be the whole answer, and the importance of considering the impact of any changes on those living in fuel poverty, which is on fairness and making sure that it's a just transition. Although we have an estimated 2.6 million dwellings in Scotland, we continue to need and build new homes. Over 2,100 were completed in the year to June 2019. Mainly about 3/4 private properties, but also buildings commissioned by housing associations and a small amount, about 6%, by local authorities. And the vast bulk of housing that we live in for the next 30 years has been built already. And you'll hear this weekend from speakers who are working in all aspects of the housing sector, new build and retrofit, improving and existing buildings, and homes privately owned and those lived in by tenants in the private, local authority and housing sectors. They bring a wide variety of perspectives to help you make your recommendations. In weekend 4, we will then explore how our communities contribute towards climate change and climate action and the impact of climate change on communities. Because communities and neighborhoods are at the heart of our lives and where there is most often inequalities and inequities and unfairness. I don't know if you remember, but I told you last weekend that in deprived areas, you see the worst impacts of poor air quality. And I mentioned the idea of the 20-minute neighborhoods where most of people's needs are a short walk away. Next weekend, you'll be given more evidence about how our immediate environment and our needs for recreation, for healthcare and education can be planned and delivered in a way that is good for our well-being and for the climate. The word community sometimes sounds intangible, or it sounds like a small aspect of what we're talking about, but it is so critical and so crucially important to how we live and how we feel about our lives. There are almost 3,000 schools in Scotland with an estimated value of around £7 billion. There are almost 300 hospitals, almost 5,000 GPs. The way they deliver services, whether education or healthcare or leisure facilities, can have a huge, significant impact on climate change. Improving the way we plan and deliver these services can have significant co-benefits to addressing the impacts of climate change on people's health and help to address health inequalities, as an example. So to explore all these issues, we'll be considering these 4 questions. Tim, could I have the next slide, please? The first one, how should we Scotland change its existing homes to tackle the climate emergency in a fair and effective way? Second slide, please. How should Scotland change how it builds new homes to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way? Next slide, please. How should Scotland change how it plans its communities to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way? And the last question, please, the next slide. How should Scotland change how it delivers community services to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way? So I'm really looking forward to spending this weekend exploring these issues with you. And now I'll hand back to Tim to take you through the next steps. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction, Daisy. So as we've heard, for this weekend, we'll be focusing on the 2 questions that relate to homes, and for the remainder of today, we'll be focusing particularly around existing homes, and then tomorrow we'll be looking in more depth at new homes. But before we move on to that, we just want to get you to kind of cast your mind back to the previous weekends, where you voted on a series of priorities that you felt were most important for the groups who were selected to look to consider for each of the topics. So those priorities applied across all of the different topics that both this group and also the other groups will be considering over these weekends. So for today, we're going to break you up into some small groups again in just a moment, and you're going to be looking at the priorities that came out from those discussions across the whole assembly that apply particularly to homes. So if we can now set up the breakout groups, and the facilitators will lead you in that discussion. So over the next, I guess, the remainder of today, we're going to be hearing some evidence from some presenters. We're going to be focusing particularly around the topic of existing homes. So the question that Daisy outlined earlier: how should Scotland change its existing homes to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way? So we are going to be hearing a fair amount of information, so do please make sure that you've got kind of paper and pen or a way of kind of taking notes to hand. We have the presenters with us today as well, so they'll be able to drop into your breakout groups later to answer any questions. So do jot anything down if you have kind of a question that you want to follow up with any of them. But I'm going to hand over to Daisy now to introduce our first presenter.
Thank you, Tim. Just let's start off. Let's kick off. First of all, I'd like to introduce Professor Laurie McElroy from the University of Strathclyde to present an overview of some of the key issues associated with our homes and how Scotland should change to tackle the climate emergency.
Great, thanks, Daisy. So I will just set up that video now. So that's the first of our presentations for this afternoon from Laurie, which really sets out some of the key issues and challenges with existing homes and their contribution to climate change. So before we hear from our other speakers, we're going to give you some time to reflect on what you've heard from Laurie, and also kind of have a discussion amongst yourselves. And it's also an opportunity, if you want to call Laurie or one of the other speakers into your breakout room as well, to answer any questions that have kind of come up for you from that presentation, then you'll be able to do that as well. So we'll now open the breakout rooms and allow you to have that conversation. Okay, so I think we should make a start again. So you've just heard a presentation and had a bit of an opportunity to talk about what you heard from Laurie, who set out, I guess, the background and gave you a bit of an overview of the topic. In a moment, you're going to hear 4 different perspectives on the sorts of changes that could be delivered in order to make Scotland's existing homes more environmentally friendly and tackling the issue of climate change. In advance of the weekend, we sent out a note template that we'd like you to use for this exercise. It's the one that looks a bit like a rainbow, if you remember that. So if you could have that to hand, if possible. I'm just going to share my screen now so you can see what that looks like, and I'm going to talk you through how we'd like you to use it. So hopefully you should have received something that looks a bit like this. A bit of a rainbow with in the centre individual, then households, communities, neighbourhoods, then organisations, businesses and public services, then public policy, regulation, tax and incentives, and finally society, norms, values and beliefs. So as you listen to the next 4 presentations, they'll be talking about ideas that will be positioned at kind of varying different levels of this. So some of the ideas that they talk about might relate to things that individuals can do. Others might relate to things that organisations, businesses and public services might do. So as you hear those things and as you hear ideas that maybe kind of strike you and interest you, capture them on the rainbow according to what level they're at. And this is really just to help us think about all the different levers and all the different things that can be done by different kind of types of organisations and individuals as well. So just to give you a bit of an example of what that might look like, we've got one here that doesn't relate to the topic of homes, but relates to the topic of diets. So, and some examples of the sorts of things that might fall at different levels. So at the level of the individual, you might have things like mostly plant-based and locally sourced diet. You might have something around kind of cooking skills and recipe ideas. So those are things that individuals would be able to do themselves, to be able to help to contribute. Then you have things that relate to things that households and communities and neighbourhoods could do. So things around such as the provision of community allotments, public urban fruit trees and edible parks, meal planning and subscription models. So all things that could happen at the level of households, communities and neighbourhoods. Then businesses could do things around meat-free days in school canteens, and meat-free days in big employer canteens. So that's kind of businesses, organisations, public services. The next level out, we might have things like a change in farming subsidies, marketing and labelling regulation, fishing quota trading schemes. So those are the sorts of things that you might do through public policy, regulation, taxes and incentives. And finally, at the level of, I guess, the big kind of societal norms, values and beliefs and things that may need to change there. There could be kind of attitudes towards convenience. There could be attitudes towards meat, protein, and finally, fish as a commodity versus wildlife. So that's just really an example to help to, I guess, give you a sense of what we're talking about. So just as you hear the ideas through the presentations, think about what level they would be at. Are they things individuals would be doing, or things that kind of businesses and public services would be doing, and all of the other levels as well. So I'm going to hand over to Daisy now to introduce the first of the presentations.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. And as Tim said, we're going to hear 4 fantastic presentations, and huge thank you to the speakers as well. You're all here, and later on we can, there might be questions for you as well. Just to say very quickly before I introduce the first speaker, after each video that we play, I'll probably have about a minute to just reflect and take down notes, just think about what you've just heard, and maybe prepare us for some of the discussions that come afterwards. So first up is a presentation from Chris Morgan from George Gilbert's Architects. Thank you very much, Chris. I think there's a couple of things that stood out. We can't new build our way out of the problem, and we need a more creative and thoughtful approach to keep Scotland as beautiful as it is. So thank you for that. Just take a minute or so for reflection and any notes that you want to take. Brilliant, thank you. Our next presentation is from John Turner from Link Group. Excellent, thank you so much, John and Iona, for that. I mean, a couple of things quickly that stood out to me: the complexity of targets and terminology, and the fact that yes, no one size fits all, and we need to find practical solutions. So like previously, let's just take a minute to kind of reflect on what we've just heard and take some notes if needed. Excellent, thank you. Our next speaker is, next presentation is from Elizabeth Layton from Existing Homes Alliance. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Again, I love that. Just get on with it, and some really interesting practical ideas there on how we can just get on with it, and also to make it easy and fair for people to do so. Thank you. Just take a minute or so to reflect. Thank you. And our last presentation is from Matt Lipson from Energy Systems Catapult. Thank you, Matt. That was really interesting as well. He does a service, getting us below carbon. What an interesting topic to discuss. And I can't even imagine what life was, without Google and email. So definitely a really good place to start thinking about these things. And yes, the rows about the thermostat sound very familiar in my household. Let's just take a minute, and then I'll hand over to Tim for the next steps.
So you've heard a lot of ideas there, which have hopefully got you thinking about the different things that can be done to help to address the existing housing stock in Scotland. So we're now going to give you about half an hour to discuss those different proposals in your small groups again. And so this is the final task for today. So we'll now open the breakout groups. Great, thanks everyone, and welcome back. So we are almost at the end of today. Just a few final little bits and pieces to tie up. So first of all, just want to say a really big thank you to our presenters today for both making the videos and joining us to answer your questions. It's a little bit hard to do this online, but kind of a round of applause to them. Secondly, I want to say thank you to all of you for kind of sticking with us. I know it's been a long day, but hopefully you've had a lot to discuss and a lot to get into. So tomorrow it will be similar. So we'll be looking particularly at the topic of new homes tomorrow morning. So in a very similar format, you'll kind of get to hear some presenters, then you'll get to have a bit of a discussion around the proposals that you hear. Tomorrow afternoon, then we'll be returning to what you've just been doing and what you'll be doing tomorrow morning to then start the process of working those up into recommendations, and we'll kind of talk you through the process of making recommendations as an assembly as well. So that's what will be happening tomorrow. We'll be starting at 10 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning, and if you could join a bit early as you've been doing for the other sessions, to make sure that we can kind of solve any kind of technical hitches before the session starts. And finally, Ruth, I've not kind of prepared you for this, but I just wondered whether you'd like to say a few words. I know you've been kind of listening in and kind of contributing to one of the discussions. Ruth, would you like to say anything to kind of bring us to a close?
So I've been really pleased to be sitting in on one of the small group conversations. I've not said very much, but I've been listening to the remarkable engagement that you all are bringing to this conversation and the huge skills. And what I'm really noticing is, first of all, the engagement. People are really asking good questions and applying your own skills and experience and knowledge to those questions. And also there's a real eagerness to let's get on with this. We want to now keep digging. So there's a real energy at the end of today in the group I was in, like we've only really just begun this digging deeper process. And I hope that means there's a real energy to come back tomorrow and to keep going. It's been a long day though. So lots of drained individuals. So I hope you all have a good night and come back tomorrow fueled up and ready to continue this conversation. But I'm so impressed with the level of engagement and the level of expertise and the quality of questions that folks are bringing, and well done to all the facilitation team as well.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Ruth. And we've heard that from all of the presenters as well. They felt kind of thoroughly grilled by you all, and I think have had a really enjoyable time of having those conversations with you as well. So thank you for all of that engagement. It is the end of today, so thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.